links that'll take you to wherever you want to go. So if there's a platform that you're predominantly comfortable on, like Facebook, for example, then you could use Facebook. Or if you're like, I don't want to use that app and I want to use a different app, you could go there too. So I mean, the show's going out like onto like several platforms right now.
Right on.
I am absolutely stoked to see it. One of the big problems I've got when I'm setting up the show to talk to people is that a form of catch up ends up happening while we're talking, and then I feel like I'm saying the same thing again during the show. And so it's a thing. It's really funny because I've talked, obviously, after the show is done with its stream and the broadcast has happened. There's a bit of a BTS, a behind the scene vibe happens with me and who I've been on the show with, and the conversation still carries on. And I hear often be like, you were very short when you were booking me. I felt like I'm like, how you been? You were like, good. I'll talk to you soon. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm worried that if I do the catch up either in DM or in text or on voice on the phone, then it leaves there's a weird error while the show's going on. And so this unique, awesome energy and vibe that's happening is truly organic. And so when the excitement is happening for us both, hopefully it ends up being transmitted to people that are checking out the show. I'm
Yeah, for sure, man.
I want to say that as a partier, depending on the parties or the clubs that you're going to, whether it's warehouse, festival, rave, club night, there's somebody that's behind the scenes, promoters, a whole group of people that are making this magic happen. Dose Promotions, Dose Productions, Dose, as an entity that was doing parties in Toronto and in Canada, was super impressive upon me. I'm exposed to a great deal of music and performers that helped shape what I'm up to today. And that's what's getting me, obviously, even more super excited about talking with you right now, is that I'm able to get some insight and stuff on maybe some of the things that maybe I might have been too nervous to ask you when you were booking me for the shows.
Awesome. Yeah, man, fire away,
And so it is awesomeness that I say, welcome Wayne Nealing, one part of Dose, here in the utility room. It's
Excellent. Glad to be here, brother.
Yeah, super
Nice to
stoked to
chat with
have
you
you
for
with
sure.
us. You know, I wanna actually just I want to be more current before we get into a little bit of what was and how it was. Did you know when you were curating this music at the time, did you feel that this was underground and alternative to a lot of the choices and the selections that the promoters were making then? I mean, trance was really prominent. There was a form of techno and house that had representation, but Dose wasn't exactly any of those things.
Yeah, it was such a different time, right? When segregation was like boosted up, everybody's kind of ego that was involved in whatever pocket, let it be like the techno or the trance, or everybody wanted to kind of be the opposite of everybody else. But really what happened for us was when Steve went out to Vancouver and spent time with Chris Laycock, who was his original partner in Dose when they created Dose Clothing, and then from there it became Productions, and then that's when I came in. Steve spent a lot of time in Vancouver, and I spent time in Denver, and both of those cities offered like different music than we had ever heard. It didn't come from the UK, right? It was just happening at that time in West Coast breaks, and it was kind of sweeping along. And just to get a taste of that kind of changed my life really, because it was something that we could kind of like put our label on, because it didn't sound like anything else, and nobody else at that time was doing it or bringing that type of sound. So, and then you know how it is once you meet friends in the industries, like you book one guy and he introduces you to another guy, and then all of a sudden they're just a bunch of friends that are involved in creating this thing. That but at the time you're just you're living for party, or like you're thinking about two parties down the road, but that's it. That's your future at that time. So definitely it was it was it was it felt cool to bring something here that wasn't here, and I think that's what was different for us.
Do you think, how about this? When you were getting a lot of the artists that you were considering to bring in for booking, or even people that you did successfully book and bring in for the shows, when the genre was being described to you from the booking agent, were they calling this house music?
Funny because we didn't really go through, and that's I think I backdoored it, and it was one of the keys to us, um, bringing DJs like DJ Dan and Terry Mullen, Barry Weaver, these guys that were already established in the West Coast. These guys were the top of their sound that they had been pushing for years. So when we just kind of snuck in and met them as just friends, it was already like, yeah, they're like, yeah, we want to come to Toronto and party. Yeah. And then when they would come here, our city has so much to offer. The partiers in the city were the reason why all the DJs kept wanting to come back, because the parties were so fucking good, because the partiers were so good, right? Everybody, the vibe, it just, the city had a lot to offer, and once those DJs had a chance to come and taste it, they wanted to like share it with their friends. So there wasn't a lot of booking through agents. It was a lot like, when it got to the book through the agent, it was like there was no negotiating price. It was just whatever the agent said it was, and but you got to pick the dates. You know what I mean? So you'd say, oh, I kind of want Dan for July 12th, October 31st, and December 28th, and then you can kind of like work out those dates, as long as you just pay the going rate.
What was the description of the music though? What was the umbrella that you found that it was falling under? Did were
It would
people
it would be like West Coast breaks and house. That's how it would have been described. That's what everybody felt like they were listening to and playing. It was house, breakbeat house, upbeat house. Yeah.
so do you ever feel that because this genre didn't have perhaps a name that was really associated with it, certified, cemented, that it made it more of a challenge to market the parties to people? Because, for example, let's say if I say house music and I'm thinking about the era at that time and what was going on, let's say Mark Farina and Derek Carter, and
Yeah.
this is house music.
Yes, but this is Toronto,
Okay.
so though they were already taken, right? Like you remember those times,
Sure, sure, but I'm also thinking
right?
like maybe now currently like with DJ Dan, using him as a performer as an example, his sound
Hmm.
currently is very housey. And but maybe back in 1996 and 1997, not so much. Uh,
Oh, totally, because he would be a fuse, right? And that was what they fused it all together. They brought the house, the breakbeats, the techno, the tech house, and they were able to keep it light at the times that it needed to be, with the breakbeats, which I know you love too, and at the right time, like it could destroy a room, especially if the DJ knew how to fish them right back in with something a little harder that brought them where they needed to be, right? It just changed the flow, and those guys were masters at it, right? And they orchestrated the crowd like a West Coast DJ would, and in Toronto we hadn't heard that, so it was a different feel altogether, right? Everybody'd been to 100 parties, but nobody'd been to parties conducted by DJs with that point of view.
I'm trying to think, because I'm it's here's what I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to get to, I guess, the idea that what Dose was doing, and it's again a part of the intro. I'm not sure if y'all were aware. What Dose was doing at the time was bringing in a form of house that was a variance. It wasn't house music, but at the same time, it wasn't not. For a moment, I felt that on the dance floor, what the conversation brought it to for a name was hard house, because it was a lot tougher than, for example, again, in this instance and for the show now, Mark Farina and Derek Carter. If I was listening to their house music and then obviously was listening to a mix set from a live, a dose show, there is a big difference on what it is. Both can be funky, but it felt
For
like the
sure.
stuff that was coming from Dose it's this vibe, where House is it's got it's more of a this it's more
Totally.
of a
Yeah,
this
but
it's more
see,
of a this fun.
yes, but house is such a large spectrum. Like if we want
Of
to
course.
to squeeze it down at that time, like there was no thought of, oh geez, like how do we name this, or how do we make this more appealing to the people outside? Because we were always just thinking, like, we by our parties, you could tell we were always like fishing for the big boys too, right? Because we went after the Carl Coxes, we went after the the Armands, the people that were barely reachable. You know what I mean? But as far as like straight house, at that time, it wasn't like house, like that type of house wasn't being played in the main rooms of those events. I remember the first time we had Peter and Tyrone, who like Toronto's house duo, was in '96 at our 2 year, and it was in our it was in the second room upstairs, and they killed it. But that was when house first came. Same when Sneak, when we brought him, like we always loved house. It was just we loved Chicago house, like because that's what we knew. That's what the records I had bought. Right. That's who we went after when we had a first chance to do a big event. Um, and it was Terry Mullen, Dan, and it was Sneak. You know what I mean? And we brought kind of that house flavor to the dance floor, where the booth was on the floor, speakers stacked right beside it, and it was just like a party. And Sneak brought a different house flavor than he usually would, right? Because he played to what was in front of him. But I guess that's why I'm saying house is such a big bracket, and it's interwoven so much that like we could have an acid house Terry Mullen literally played right after Chicago house DJ Sneak. So I think it was everything. That's why I don't separate it. I don't see it as I want to. For some reason, when I hear hard house, I think of from like London, like hard floor sort of stuff. You know what I mean? But
Tiny
I don't
tracks,
think of.
new energy. I thought it
I
was
think
called New Energy, and then somehow that became Hard House, and
yeah,
America
and I
lost
don't
the
even
name.
know New Energy. I don't like that either. But I don't know if I would like anything. That's why I'll
It's
just
yeah,
stick with
no,
like
I mean,
funky house or acid house or
sure, sure. I mean, I'm not. It's not.
whatever.
It's not. I'm not at a place of where I'm feeling like I'm trying to favor a genre or call one out for being lesser than. I've wondered about this, and with the show coming at us and knowing what you all were doing, because uh, I remember that the funky breaks and the acid and the harder house vibe was definitely an intro stuff. And then I also remember that you guys kind of graduated to more houseier sounds as you went on. Bringing in Sneak, bringing in Armand. That you guys had the big house players on the big stages at the raves. You know, this early sound, the 303, the breakbeat, the very aggressive house. This is I mean, this I it's why I'm romantic today. I want to say
Yeah.
thanks. I want to say thanks. Obviously, I appreciate. I don't know. This is one of the things I want to talk about. I don't know if there's a right or wrong to this discussion. You guys were up to something and breathing air. And if I could have been a fly on the wall at that moment, whatever it was that you were doing, it shaped me. So many people, obviously across the board. So it's super awesome. I'm
Oh, thanks,
curious.
man.
So now I want to be the fly on the wall. I've got this opportunity because I want to go back and pull us into a bit of a time machine. Get us to the place of where you guys are in Barrie and you're looking at each other and you're saying, "Let's throw a rave."
Funny. It didn't really happen like that because, like I said, Steve and his partner Chris Laycock, who really like he I guess he kind of touched base in the scene when they did the clothing, and then right after that he moved out to Vancouver and did his parties there. But it was like they were same name but separate. You know what I mean? So Steve kind of did the Toronto end of things, and Chris did the Vancouver end of things. And after Steve had done, I think, two parties in Barrie with a collective of guys that were, still a part of kind of what happened, and still a part of what's going on today. Just like connected with the people in and around the scene still. I got involved, and I think I was working in a machine shop in '93, beginning in '93, and I had to drive to the Poconos with like a bunch of ski tuners. Okay, and they were bolted in the back. And Steve had always been going down to the parties, him and Chris, and he'd bring back the tapes. And I didn't have too much interest because you know I just like I had hadn't it the bug hadn't hit me. I'd never been to a party, so my experience was like uh, Dr. Trances was Into the Light, and I listened to that like I don't even know
Me too.
how many times, back and forth to the Poconos, to the point where I got back and I was just like, what the fuck? What? It's what?
Yeah.
So then when Steve was like, oh, we're going to throw a party. So he threw Eternal 2 in Barrie with Aaron and all the Barrie crew. And I still hadn't really been a part of it. I was more just the brother there. And then I lost my rocker at that party in Barrie at the roller rink. And then from there, when like started doing parties in that summer in Barrie, I started to help and do things. And then once we went to Toronto, we first hooked up with Alan at Ecstatic, and that's how we did our first dose party. Was December in '94 in Toronto, and then from that point, I I'd done stuff in Toronto with Steve, but the Barrie portion was much like a collective of all the Barrie partiers that still promoted in the core of the dose promotion machine, and Steve. And then I kind of latched on once it came to the Toronto side of things.
One of the parties that I felt was, earth shaking in the city was the parking garage party.
Yes.
How did you guys come across the venue? How did you do it? Like
Oh, things like times, like times are just so different.
so
It
that
was,
that's obviously, and it's relative. I think to myself, particularly, today, that the more that things change, the more they stay the same. You know,
but not really.
but I mean, there's a relativity to it. But I just, yes, there's some stuff that obviously just wouldn't fly. That's why I think to myself, can you imagine right now trying to get a parking garage?
If I remember correctly, remember it was at 393 King Street, and Cyrus had thrown a party, I think on the third floor. There was multiple floors. There was things happening in the building, and I can't remember. We had leased it from, well, rented it for a day from, I don't know, even know the property owner, the manager, however it was. So it was like, oh, well, you could have this floor or this. And then we were thinking, I think you got to walk upstairs or do this. And then he was just casually said, oh, and then we got the parking lot. And we were just like, oh, let's take a look. And then we saw it. And then we were just like, this is just so ridiculous. Let's fucking do it. And then we just did it. But we were just dumb kids, right? We just said, let's do this, and we did it. And it's done, right? And it shaped a lot because but once again, like that was DJ Dan bringing DJ Dan and San Francisco and West Coast here and orchestrating in a way that nobody had heard before. And same with everybody that played that day. It was Czech, Davenport. Um, I don't think Barry was there, but it was quite a party.
Did you always feel, it's a it's a funny word to use, but do you always feel connected to the parties as DJs? Would you ever consider doing the shows and Stretch and Hooker not performing at them?
Oh yeah, most times it was like that, and many parties we never ended up playing. Um, so yeah, that wasn't a priority. It was more of a promotional tool. Plus, we could party at the end of in the second or third room at 6 o'clock. We can let it loose when all the chips have been counted, and it's like there's nothing else you can do, right? So that became kind of a really great release for us, and then just turned into more.
What was it that you guys felt was the fuel behind the momentum for rave in the late '90s in the city of Toronto? Was it the sense of adventure? Was it the lack of accessibility to the music regularly or on demand?
I think it was.
These are just some examples. There's
I think
obviously
it was.
there's
I
obviously
think
more.
the music was medium accessible. So I think the people that could track it down really connected to it, and I just think the always comes down to the people that came to the parties.
Was there did you find that there was a regular? Did you see the same faces that were coming out to Dose that you knew that when you were putting together a new party that you would see these people that were going to come to it no matter what, they weren't missing it?
Yeah, I think that there was an amount of that just because we had such a large promotional team that was always keeping it. We were, they were always ground level, and they always let us know, how people were feeling. And there was definitely like a roving group of, I don't know if it was dozens or hundreds that were going to be there no matter what. And I think every company in Toronto had a group like that at that time.
Do you think that because of that participation, this was key for the element of the success for the shows, not just for
Um,
attendance, but also on the vibe?
for the vibe, for sure, because it would carry it through, right? It would, the once the parties got to a certain level, even if you had a pocket of 400 people that were regulars, when there's 10,000 people there, they just get melted in. But so I don't think in an overall sense it directed the success, but I think that it complemented it, and it added to the whole feeling that you would have when in that day when you could go to a party and you could feel like you were at when you were at a Cyrus party. You knew you were at a Cyrus party. When you were at a Destiny party, it was pretty clear. Same with Better Days. They'd go crazy with their lasers, and they would do their thing. Everybody had their kind of feel, and I think a lot of our feel, because we didn't put too much into the production, was the people and the party and the music and just making it loud.
So the legend of the party grows. There's tons of support on the street. I'm thinking about what it was that you were saying earlier on when we were talking, and that you jump on with your bro and smash it at 6 o'clock in the morning because all the chips have been cast and the party's that's where it's at. We're nearing the end. But during the jam, when you're going ahead and you're collecting the idea for it, you're putting together the list of performers that are playing. What's on your mind for the curation? How is it that you're thinking to yourself, who should start the party and who should end? What were you looking for?
Hmm. Um, I guess it always depended on you. You would usually center a party around your one or two headliners, and that would usually take your 1 to 4 o'clock. Uh, you would often um, have like our Tim Patrick right before that, and prior to that, from opening, it would be the half of the locals. There'd be probably like a a mid, like a not a mid. I'm not classifying DJs, but somebody other than a headliner, like a Weaver or a Czech that would play after the headliner, and then there'd be a couple slots for locals. So it was really often slotted rather than curated. Do you know, a lot of the curation came from the DJs that were able to transition from each other. So although I understand what you like, I get the question at the time, because there was so many people that you had to that had input and that you had to eventually give a shot, like, when people would be like, dude, I've done this for so many years, like everybody deserves a shot. And it's hard when you it's hard to give everybody a shot when you're trying to to make everybody happy, you know what I mean? So it was a lot about slots rather than curating an evening, because a lot of the times we felt like that's what the DJs could do all on their own, because everybody was within a pocket, that it wasn't going to be like, trance leading into house going straight into techno. Like everybody was able to hand off whatever was running at that time.
So you were confident enough in the performers that were up there that they would be able to do the handoff to the next performer to keep the night into a place of flow.
100%. 100%. 100%.
When doses is now bubbling, everyone's talking about it. People want to be at the shows. I guess what I'm wondering is at what point did you feel that the success had reached this place, and you're like, let's get involved with the nightclub. We want to move away from the idea of dose happening seasonally and make it where it's we'll see you Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, well, the policies in Toronto by the city and by the police, and the pressures they put on venues, um, created a need for a space that you could rely on. And that was at a time when there was more opportunities for more different types of sounds to come through, and more DJs. And it was like the opportunity just fell into our lap, me and Robbie. So it was kind of, it was like the rest of what happened. It just seemed like this is what we're doing next. It wasn't, let's transition. It was like, okay, let's do this and figure out how this going. And in our mind, it was going to the festival route, because the parties were getting too expensive. To You couldn't, not that you want to make a lot of money, you couldn't make money. You had been priced out by the amount of police you'd need. Not only you'd need the police, you'd need the sergeants with them for X amount of police, and then you'd need, your 3 ambulances with 2 people in each one, and then you need your union to clean up. You need the union to set up the sound to take it down, and all of a sudden, 2/3 of your cost is in things that people don't even see, and it just doesn't make sense, right? So it was less about. It was more of a necessity than a let's change.
I want to jump back a little bit because you said something and then of course I'm like bink, was this the type of stuff that you had to deal with? Did it happen with the first freakin', or was this the response that you had to deal with the second freakin' because the first freakin' was so massive?
Um, no, the first freaking actually opened a lot of people's eyes, I think, right? Because
To rave
that
in
was,
Toronto?
yeah, and the venues. That was the first time we'd used the C&E. It was the automotive building, and it was difficult to get. It was difficult to talk them into. It was a lot of legwork. At that time, I think they had the water. So not only did they get their 18,000 some odd rent, plus this, plus that, plus this, plus that, they also got the water. And I think they sold so much more than they could have imagined, that when we were asking for other buildings that are bigger, I think that the financial gain on their end, like, opened up for us the ability to think, okay, so we did that for Freakin'. What are we going to do for Connected? What are we going to do for Bittersweet? What are we going to, and then it became trying to use as many different buildings within the CNE as we could. And that took a few years to kind of to get around. And then the international center. So the international center opened up because of, I guess, what they saw, and what we were able to show them that we did at the automotive building for Freakin'. So it was all just all in the flow of what happened, right?
When you brought up Robbie from Cyrus, I'm then of course I want to ask, how did Lifeforce happen? Were you guys all friends? Was it that you were looking at each other's parties and going, "That's dope, but we're stronger together"? Like, what was the idea for it?
It was pretty much that, right? We were like, the buying power is greater, if you can, if you can split on sound, or like do double weekends. It's just the idea to work with Robbie was simple, and it was easily broached. And Ashley and Jason base were also invited in, and we had a talk around the table at 48 Able, and we decided to do that, and then that turned into the first Life Force party with De La Soul. And then after that, that's when the guys from Better Days decided to stop doing parties. So then, kind of, we took in Renegades into the fold, and which came with Tyler. So it was me, Steve, Aaron, Robbie, Tyler, and that became Life Force. You'd wonder. See, remember when I was speaking about the division at that time in our city was so was so great. The idea, um, to like to have a trance company involved just was unappealing. But in a business sense, think about what maybe Toronto could be if Destiny was a part of the Life Force thing, who knows what that road goes down, right?
Sure. I mean, there's obviously benefit of all of us being together. And then I mean, I wonder, was the influence was the influence of the partners felt when you were considering doing those parties? At that point, like, what was the transformation? Because you, you know, had the Mealings doing those, and then all
Uh,
of a sudden, you're in an office, and it becomes, there's more people that are involved. It changed the dynamic. Would you have brought in De La Soul, for example, back, before you went and did and Life Force? Was the addition of hip hop, how did that change the party? And I know that De La Soul is not first, because one of my favorite parties that I've played in Toronto ever
yeah,
was the Run DMC party that was out in Mississauga with the Peel Region Police, and they're so awesome sauce. And
yeah.
so and so I know it was happening. I always felt like that was when it first happened. It was caught off guard. And on one hand, I'm looking at it, I'm going, Run DMC, like, woo, you know,
Right.
and
Well, hey, it
and then on
was
the other
like,
hand, I'm going, well, but Run DMC, but it's at a rave.
yeah, yeah, but who created those boundaries, right? I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
of
I had
course.
huge passion for hip hop. It's a big part of me and my life, and it was like, you think back to that Freakin' Mixmaster Mike was there,
Yeah.
Executioners, like MOP was supposed to be at that one. We've had EPMD. You, we've really hurricane that industry. Like, I've always tried to touch, because I've had passion for it, and um, things were pretty big, man. So it's how do you do different, right? You can't be different without being different, and that was an avenue that I had passion, and so did everybody else that was involved. So for us, it was let's try this, and I don't know. I don't think it was a vibe killer. I think it was what it was, right? Like it was an event at an event. Like so I don't know. It was I really I think that it brought a lot to the city. I think there was more to gain there than there was to lose. And looking back, I think everybody has different opinions. Some people like just hate it and think it was the worst thing ever, and maybe for them it was. Who's to say, right? Like it at that point when there's like 12 or 13,000 people, Josh, like I don't know. Like who's counting, who's happy?
Everyone looked pretty happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Were you still partying at other people's parties? Were you ever, and I don't just mean in Toronto, did a flyer ever zoom across your desk, or did you hear about something you were like, "Oh shit, I got to be there." And you
Oh
drop what
yeah.
you do?
Yeah, lots of times for me, like this the ones that I would just go and be a fan, a lot of the times it would be like any of the hitters that would be at industry or those big nights, the Daft Punk nights, and they were always so kind, always involved there and loved the time there. But also the fuck house would have like crazy parties and and alien, like you know what I mean? Those were just gritty, fun, like hard parties that would always brought something that you hadn't heard. I liked how they went together. So yeah, those like, but as far as like party, no, not so much. A lot of the time it would be about the music or what did they do with that or who they use for the sound or where the venue or how would I use the venue or would I use the same door or how many security, like you know what I mean? Like I go to a party, I'm just thinking about everything in that party pretty much except the party because I'm trying to just, I don't know, it's just how your brain goes as a promoter, right?
Sure, it's the same thing. I mean, with I want to say it's the same thing if I'm going to go and check out a DJ, especially if they're like super technical, amazing skill. How do they
Yeah.
do that? What's going on with the fader? Oh my gosh, look at the EQ bending. It's wizardry. I'm thinking, were you going to parties though, and not just thinking like that, but also, I guess, were you ever at an event and just in an admired state where perhaps all of that slipped away? And the magic of what the promoters or promoters, whatever was being presented. This was you were in another world, and you got lost in it too. Did that happen, or
Yeah,
did you
yeah.
feel
For
that
me,
the
I was
anal?
almost it was almost always industry for me because that's where I felt comfortable, right? And everywhere else there was, you know, parties are big. There's lots of doors. There's lots of. It's not. It's different when you're at a place like that. There was nowhere else that was comfortable, right? There was no other constant in our city. So for me, at that time, I felt like when there was a wall at my back, like that like nobody was behind me. I don't know. I felt comfortable to be me and to be engaged with what was happening. Plus, the DJs would slay it and the sneak. How many times would he murder it or Derek Carter or Teneglia or like it goes on and on and on and even like Kenny would smash that place up.
Oh my god!
So not because the parties weren't incredible and I didn't get wrapped up in awesome sets within parties, but I didn't get lost in a set um, anywhere like I did at industry, I'd say.
Were you taking clues and influences from parties that you were attending? Denver, Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto. Were these ever the things that you would look at to see that what the promoter's doing besides the music that you felt that was imported from the West Coast? Was there a party idea that was also coming from there? Like, for example,
Uh,
were you ever rocking out with the Funky Techno Tribe? Were you ever out there with them and killing it?
no, I never like went to their parties and was partying with them.
Wow.
I
Okay.
did it all through Denver, and I'll tell you, I think the biggest influence for party outside of music from those events would be that they had the DJ booth on the floor. And that's something that we did as opposed to at that time, it was like stage, everybody or front and center, big stage. And then we're like, fuck it, let's put it on the floor. And then
You
that it
guys,
also created it kind of snowballed. for what we became known for, right? And that feel that we were talking about, that whoever was brought it, they brought it hard.
It's funny you mentioned. I'm gonna break away from all this right now and I just want to shoot the shit with you. Um, that Run DMC show. What year was that?
99, May 31st, 99, I think.
So it's in and around this time that I started getting plane tickets and started flying around in different cities and playing. And I just played in Vancouver the night before, and then I got off of an airplane, and I think I went home first, which was really weird, and then I got picked up, and then everyone laughed because they're like, "Why did you come all the way back here to shower? Should have just fucking rented a room because the party's kind of next door to the airport." And I was like,
Oh,
"Yo, I had no idea." Also, I can't remember who I played for in Vancouver the night before, but I do remember that I absolutely was partied out of my brains, and I almost missed the flight, and I was pretty bothered by it. And then I didn't know what my time slot was. You guys were real slow to get me the time slot. I don't think I got it until I landed. I didn't land until like 8 or 9 p.m. But
there was no text back then, buddy.
you guys totally hooked me up that night and put me on at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was in the third room, but the third room fit like 5 or 6 thousand people. And this is why I'm bringing it up to you, because I haven't played on the floor, the same level floor, without barrier. There was no barrier. It was just like people were on the speaker stacks dancing next to me. I have
I
photos from
know, I
this.
know.
I wish I should have had it set up because I didn't know I was going to go here with you. It was in my brain, but I didn't know it was going to lead here. But I did want to talk about this because I have these photos. I think I've actually posted some of them on my Facebook page and on Instagram. And the booth is literally on the floor. I can't remember, a card table. I'm not quite sure what, but
Yeah.
and it
Yeah,
was
we used to call them, like, in our us and our friends at the remember I'd say at the end of the night we used to like to play, we'd call them the fold up table sets. And then we'd end the night with them, right? And that's all it was. It's just sitting in this room with like a fold up table.
so there's a it's a giant thing. I don't have a word because firstly, no one touched the mixer or the turntables. Fortunate enough that the dance floor and everything, the whole thing is just concrete, and I think the decks were on tennis balls, and
No,
so
I think they were probably on the, we Themi would use those black boxes with
the
the bands
floater,
in them. Yeah, the floater
yes.
on. I still have them. Yeah.
So, which made it really tough because I was trying to do like cutting and scratching and stuff, and I realized that after when I first came on, like, and I bungled the first couple of mixes, like, well, that's not going to work because the decks were kind of doing
Yeah,
this
yeah.
as
You'd
and
have to hold it with one hand while you're doing it with
that's
the
yeah,
other.
and I dance while I'm playing, which made that absolutely impossible to do. So I'm like, okay, just straight mixing, and
Yeah.
and and it's when you're on the floor and you're level headed with everybody, the communication that happens is fucking sincere. It's so serious. Like
It's right
I,
there, man.
yeah, we're face to face, and like, and
Yeah.
sometimes like someone makes come dance close and just to see what's going on. Realize we're right there together, and then dance off just with that vibe. Like, holy shit, that was cool, just because of that one moment. And
Yeah.
there's other times where you get the chin scratchers just watching. You know,
Yeah,
oh,
those
oh, you
they're
screwed up.
usually off to the left or right.
But this was a really wild and magic moment. It's one that I'm never gonna forget. Yeah, I mean, I can't remember that y'all did it all the time, but it definitely did happen. I'm trying to remember another location that there was an outdoor portion, like an airplane hangar or something that was had, and it wasn't the island. It was a different party. I believe Chris Anderson was playing at it, and it was tented outside. And I think maybe it was DJ Dan versus Barry Weaver on the inside. Was this a was
Yeah.
this a hockey rink?
Um, you know what? Where was I? I had to, funny enough, it was one of those times when I had to be at Turbo, and I can't remember who was playing that night. but someone was playing that night, and I had to host them. And Steve was at there with Yano, and was that the same one, or are you
Yes,
talking about the?
that was the same party, but I can't remember, something happened with Yano and Garth. They didn't play, or they were supposed to play and they didn't want to play, or I can't
Yeah,
remember.
they
There
weren't
was a
thrilled.
drama that was around it.
I
I can't remember what it was.
remember, Josh. It was funny, and this is where I remember Yano saying to me as we were walking through Turbo, and like, because I had to bring him there or something before he went to the party, and he was like, "Why the fuck aren't I playing here?"
At Turbo. Well,
Yeah. So
Turbo was cool. The
yeah,
main
so
room at
he was.
Turbo was ridiculous. That DJ booth was That's one of my favorite DJ booths ever.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Nothing skipped in there.
No,
Records weren't skipping in there. Yeah,
no, no. It
and just
was.
the way it was, like this bird beak, like an eagle beak. If you were standing on the floor and looking, it had that arrowhead beak point to it.
Yeah, yeah,
Fucking
yeah. It was.
badass.
Yeah, that was some fun times. I don't know how we got
Sure.
there, but
Yeah. Anyway,
but
we're
yeah.
everywhere. We're everywhere.
So lots of our parties had the the decks on the floor, like lots of them. I more than probably you'd remember, because a lot of the second rooms and that we would just say fuck it, or like maybe a 2 foot riser. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just so there wouldn't be vibration, but.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't do we weren't big on the stage and the horse and pony stuff.
The one time it actually screwed me up, and I'm bringing it up, is because I did have a really great experience, and it was a great set. The Cyrus 7 year, which I know is not a Dose party, but they always had me in the house room, and they had the decks on the floor. Daft Punk was playing, I believe, with
Yeah.
DJ Sneak in the one room, Hype in the
Yeah,
other.
yeah, that was a huge party. That was
Yeah, ridiculous party, but
and Josh
also
Wink and
that's right.
Sneak, and yeah, that was a fun one. See, that's where that's one of the things with Lifeforce where it worked out so great, because remember at those times where the rooms became almost equal, right? So everybody had to have jungle. So we would be like, well, if we got to have jungle, well, let's get Robbie's. They've got the best jungle in the world, and we'll just take over, like whatever, because he had to book enough guys. And he's like, yeah, yeah, and you guys just booked the house for Cyrus. And we're like, yeah. So it just made sense. You know what I mean? It was never more too many people discussing, oh, who's going to do this. It was like, you do house, you do this. But yeah, that was a crazy party.
Really good times. I was just gonna say that at that Cyrus party, uh, it's really funny. I just all the changes that I can think of for myself. My even just the opinion change back in 1997, 1998. I would put white stickers over my vinyl, and then I'd put my own little note tag so I'd know what it was, so that while I was playing, if I was trying to be train spotted, I couldn't be train spotted. I absolutely abhor this idea today. I would want to smack my younger self and say that that would be a mistake, and that
Yeah, but you
the
lived in
music
a
needs to
different
be
world.
shared. Pardon me?
Yeah, you lived in a different world.
Sure, we all of it was a different world, and I mean the accessibility to music then compared to now is obviously
That was all the
dramatically
work,
different.
right?
Right,
Your work was finding that, and once you found it, like, you give me 3 weeks, that's mine, and then you can be known as that's it, and then
right,
everybody can play it, right?
right.
But that's, you deserve that, and I wouldn't. I would think back on that, and more of like, wow, times have changed, maybe for the better, but you did the right thing, man.
I mean it's a conversation. I'm not quite sure if it was right or wrong. If I wanted, in fact, it's wrong. And here's my opinion on it. The reason why I feel that it's wrong is because I struggle with this. I struggle with the idea of, I actually, if someone said, what kind of music do you make? What kind of music do you play? What are you into? I can't say everything. I mean, that might be the truth, but I mean, like, Jello is not everything. If more often than not, if someone thinks of Jello, they think of something that's very aggressive, headbanging, energetic, going off, exploding. Lasers and zips and
Yeah,
zaps, and right, that. So, what is that called? It's not house music, and it's not
it's party
techno.
house. I don't know. I just call
Party
it party
house.
house. So whatever. I don't know, but that's what I go with. I think that. like same with Hatiris, like his is a little more like maybe a little happier, but
I
like
think he's
there's a
definitely
lot of that.
filtered disco now, especially. I think it's
Yeah,
certified
well,
that he's that now.
we could say that, but
He's house.
he comes correct too.
Fuck yeah.
He can while it up.
Yeah. Toronto's blessed. There's so honestly, think of a
It's so
genre.
true.
There's someone here that's repping it. You know what I mean? Like
Absolutely, isn't that the truth,
it
right? If it
is for
exists,
sure.
someone's doing it here.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly that.
Someone's doing it well.
You've got a record bag still packed up right now.
Oh, I got a wall of records in my bag. I got my
You've got
tables and I got my
three
CDJs.
tracks.
I got my stuff.
Three
Pardon?
tracks. Three that you would never want to take out of your bag ever. There are three songs that you rely on to light up the dance floor. They make the room go off. You want to explode with them. You know them for sure. What are these three tracks? I don't know that one.
No, honestly, I have too many. I have too many. Uh, some favorites. Okay. Well, I guess probably Disco to Disco would be there.
Jacques LeConte,
Uh,
Stuart Price, my man.
like I hate to say, when I think of this next track, I'm more thinking of the timing of like when it meant this to me, not what it's become. But pumping at the time was like very important for me. And then I would say a catalog of Sneak records, like 'cause I wouldn't leave home without them. So uh, there's too many, right? Because like there's break. Like, do we get into break beats or do I go to the acid or do I can't. That's why if you remember, like I couldn't leave the house without two fucking packed bags, fucking full. And I'm only playing for a half hour because I'm with Steve, who has another two bags packed full. So you know what I mean. We could never really decide what had to what we had to play because we brought fucking everything. I couldn't boil it down to 40 records ever. Never couldn't do it because I would feel
Wow.
like I'm only going to play like this sound. But what if it's that? You know what I mean? I always felt like you never know what you needed to play. So we had it all.
I have one last question before I want to give you my virtual hug and wish you all the best. And my last question is this: do you still walk into a variety of places, venues, buildings, spaces, and look at it and go, "Throw a really great party in here"?
Fuck everywhere I go. Everywhere I go. It's just like it's just in us, and and I know you do, and I know we all do, and it's hard to like drive by the places that used to be our venues, or like to drive like in Liberty Village where Hannah used to be. You know what I mean? And it's like obviously it's a different time, it's a different life, but yeah, those venues, like just reminiscing, just thinking about like where venues used to be, man, let alone walking into like a Shoppers Drug Mart with like 40-foot ceilings going, oh, look at this perfect amount of exits.
Truly awesome catching up with you tonight on the show. Oh, you're frozen, but at least you've got a dynamite smile. Okay, unfrozen. Did I cut
Right
out?
on.
Did you hear me or you didn't hear me?
No,
Can
I
I
heard you. I heard you, brother. I
all
think it
right.
was just
Well,
me.
I ultimately just want to say thank you for being with us tonight. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for the callback. All of it. Just very super dynamite.
Awesome.
Having you with us.
Thanks for calling me, Josh. I super appreciate it, brother.
It's essential. That is Wayne Mealing. This is Utility Room. You are absolutely awesome sauce, and we'll see you next week. Wayno, don't touch that dial. But as for all y'all, see you soon.